here in about 2 or 3 minutes. We've got a lot of people logging in right now as I speak. So grab a quick drink of water and come back to your computer. In 2 minutes, we'll get started here with data-driven dentistry, balancing automation, and personal touch. Thank you. 2 minutes. All right, everyone. As the last few start logging in, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I'm actually more excited about this session than most sessions, although I'm always kind of excited to kind of dive into these type of topics. But today is about utilizing data to help us make decisions about how we run our practice. And those of you that have been through, all of my teaching courses and curriculum, you guys know that we're heavy users of data. We've actually perfected the way of being a CEO in a dental practice and using different tools to cut down our time tremendously and to make sure that we're running the practices correctly. So this is one of those ingredients. I'd like to introduce you to our guest that's going to be delivering the content today. His name is Steve Jensen. He's a VP of Business Development at Dental Intelligence. I've known him for years. He's been involved in the company a long time. He's also been heavily involved in kind of the innovation side of what Dental Intelligence does and actually how it's now completely changing how we run a dental practice. But of course, we have to understand what that is and how to use it. And I want you to learn kind of the latest stuff of how we're running practices. So Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to you. You've got the content, the slides. I will every now and then maybe interrupt you here or there and ask some questions. By the way, those of you that are on, feel free to post your questions in the chat area if you can, and we'll try to get those questions answered in the session. If we cannot, we will do our best to answer them after this session. And this session will also, I believe, I'll find out for sure, but I believe we're going to be recording this as well. So for whatever reason, if you've got some connectivity problems or anything like that, you can contact us and we will have you watch the recording if needed. All right, Steve, go ahead, take it away.
Sweet. And I just want to make sure, thank you everyone for having me here. Very excited for tonight. Made some adjustments. This is going to be a fun presentation. I added some new stuff in here, some new benchmarks that we just released. So this will be a good time. And just to make sure, Scott, everyone's seeing my slides, right? I've got those up on there, the intro slides.
Yes.
All right, cool. So tonight, I always like telling people what I'm going to tell them, right? So that's what I'm going to start with. Tonight, I'm going to first start with talking about scaling a business a little bit. This is mostly a reflection on the 7 years that I've been with Dental Intelligence, really hyper-focused on how do we help dental practices be successful as the market changes, as DSOs grow, as things get more expensive, as dynamics change. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about a few key lessons I've learned in the last 7 years. And then I want to share some things. So that'll be pretty quick. Then I'm going to share some industry trends / problems that need to be solved, some stuff that everyone's facing, 3 main things. And then we're going to talk about some systems that we can use or iterate on to solve those problems and beat the market. That's the idea of what I want to do tonight. So if that's interesting to you, then stick around. If that's not, go ahead and bail. But I hope it is. I think it will be. These are proven systems across over 10,000 practices. So it's January. I think it's a normal time for everyone to reflect on their life in January. Think about your goals for the year. And lately, I've been reflecting on the last 7 years. So I joined DI in 2018, and the whole team fit in a dinky little conference room. And we got to the point where now in 2025, we're nationwide. We had employees everywhere, all across the nation. We're heavily remote with several hundred still here in Utah, hosting big conferences. And it's a way different feel than we were before. One of the favorite parts of my job is meeting with individual practice owners and talking about their business. For some of you, you might think, hey, growing from one small location into like one massive super monster practice is interesting to me. Some of you might think growing into a big DSO is interesting. And some of you might think, you know what, like I would just like to optimize my individual practice, and that might be interesting. The things we're going to talk about tonight are all going to be relevant to all 3 of those buckets, okay? There's a doctor I met with this last August. So I've been working with her for a little over a year. And she came in and said, hey, I bought this practice and can't grow. The doctor said there were a ton of active patients, and there really weren't. So he said there were 2,000. There were actually 700 active patients. And in her first year of implementing some simple principles, she went from 366K in collections to 800K in the first year. Now, Scott, you're probably sitting there like, oh, I could have probably taken this thing to like 1.2, 1.5 million. But for her, this was a huge win. Small team, just her, one admin, and a hygienist. Okay, so and then one FTE. So really small, hasn't scaled that team. So pretty cool to get to 800K in collections for her little business. So it doesn't always have to be massive growth. I just wanted to qualify that before I jump into kind of my growth story. One of the other things that was cool with her business that I'll share before we get into systems is she was just bleeding patients, another like common problem that practices face. We went from the left-hand side, this is what a practice looked like, but in the old leadership guard, he had no idea he was just losing patients out the back door. And we tidied up that within a month of talking. And that's just a systems problem that we'll discuss tonight. So lessons learned from working at DI. When I joined, I mentioned we were just little, and we have over 10x our revenue growth in those years, right? In almost 7 years. I want you guys to imagine what that might look like if you took your dental practice, say you're at 1.2 in collections, and all of a sudden you went to 10x. Okay, think about the patient volume you would have to experience. Think about the operatory space that you would need. Think about how many payments you would need to collect from patients. Think about the insurance claims volume that you'd be processing. And I want you to start to imagine what would start to break in your practice if you tried to take 10x the patient volume and start to push it through the business, right? What would break really quick? As a company, as we grew, you can imagine we're just like any other business. We do software, you guys do dentistry, but we're not all that different. We're having the same questions in our head. How do we not sacrifice quality, but improve efficiencies? How do we take really good care of our customers, but not have to dramatically scale how many team members we have? How can we be more efficient? How can we make it easier for our customers to get the answers they need in the most cost-effective way that also is a great experience? So we're asking very similar questions to you guys. In order to scale, I want you guys to take note of these things. In order to scale, we had to go from, in the early days, humans and heroics. It was everyone, all hands on deck. If there was a problem, we just jumped on it, to solving problems through processes and tools, things that were repeatable. We had to go from directives, the CEO telling everyone exactly what to do in their job, to being more objectives focused, giving people an outline of what we want to do and letting team members go and solve problems. We had to go from being gut driven as a business, which sounds funny as an analytics provider, but we had a lot of gut calls early in the business, to being very data driven about the decisions we make. We had to go from making road promises about what we were going to do and products we were going to deliver to having roadmaps and deliverables that we stuck to and followed through on the plan. And then we had to shift from having hope for the future, which is important when you're just getting going, to creating a system that is execution and predictability focused, where we know if we put more marketing dollars into the system, it's going to produce this much in revenue, these new customers. If we put this number of dollars into our CS org, we're going to be able to take care of X hundreds of clients. And it's like clockwork. It has to be that way in order for us to grow as a business. And
so Steve, I want to interrupt here. Sorry, but in taking this to a dental practice, the one that stands out to me a lot is gut feelings to data driven.
Yeah.
Examples I see all the time is this gut feeling that we need more new patients and the marketing isn't working. Yet the data says we're getting a lot of calls, but we're missing them. And even when we talk to them, they're not converting to an appointment. That we're actually getting 4 times more potential patients than what's actually being scheduled from our marketing. Or another example, gut feeling is my treatment coordinator is not that great. I'm not getting case accepted. My schedule is just wide open.
Yeah.
When data driven says, actually the case acceptance data says that it's pretty normal. It's pretty average, but we're not diagnosing a lot. We're actually diagnosing way less in our practice than an average practice, specifically on the hygiene side. So those are kind of examples of like our guts telling us something, but man, it's not always true. When the data is easy to understand, we get right to the issue.
Man, you perfectly teed up the place where I'm going to next. So once upon a time, there was a time in dentistry where you didn't have digital x-rays, right? It was all manual stuff that you're pulling. And I think dentistry has aligned around how important it is to have very clear images in order to solve the health problems within the mouth, right? Now, one of the big shifts we need to make as an industry, I want you to think about taking x-rays of the business, okay? So we have invested in, even to the point now where we've got cool AI tools like Pearl or Overjet, where you can go and have it use AI to mark up the mouth and show you, hey, here's places to go and look. We've got similar things happening in the data space now in dentistry. So I want you to think about your practice now, to Scott's point, like gut feeling to data driven, and consider what tools do I have in place to take a health x-ray of my business, to give me a dashboard, a tool I can look at to really understand, can I quickly identify where I'm healthy and quickly identify where I might have pathologies, things in the business that I need to focus on and improve and make some restorations on, or some improvements or some cosmetic things, maybe even if you want to compare it that way. So today, the last thing I'll share, and then I'll kind of share some industry problems. One of my favorite quotes is this: when performance is measured, performance improves. When performance is measured and reported back, the rate of improvement accelerates. So here I want us to consider some industry problems. I'm going to show you guys 3 things that are happening in dentistry right now. And the truth is, not all of these are new. One is particularly new, I think. It might surprise some folks, but the others aren't. Year over year, we have flat or declining patient retention. I'll show you here some slides in a second. We have a decrease overall in the industry on treatment acceptance. I'll show you both the patient acceptance number and the dollars number. And then we're seeing an increase in total days to collect. So it's taking longer to get paid. Let me just show you.
I'm sorry, could you go back to that? For those of us that don't speak data, so we're seeing more patients leave practices. Unfortunately, more people are just saying no to treatment, and it's taking us longer to get paid.
Yep.
That's a grim picture. All right, sorry, continue.
Yeah, that's not fun, but they're problems that on the average everyone's facing, okay? So I've got some numbers highlighted here. I'm not planning on spending long here. I just wanted to highlight exactly what Scott said. What's causing patients to leave? There are some systems issues that are solving that, or that are creating issues there that I will dive into. But there are things like our pre-appointment percentage, which is just simply how many of my patients are currently scheduled to come back. The average practice has just over half, 54% scheduled to come back. Or another one might be, I think hygienist teams have gotten a lot better at this. when someone comes in for hygiene, how good are we at scheduling them for their next appointment? The average practice is getting 81% scheduled, which on its face sounds good. But when you start to do the math and you say, okay, I see 1,000 patients in these first 6 months of the year, my hygiene team's going to get 800 of them scheduled, but 200 are going to leave not scheduled. And then I have to get them back. Or now all of a sudden in the second half of the year, I've only got 800 scheduled, and the hygiene team's only going to schedule 80% of that. Now I'm going to be left with, 720 or so.
Well, if I do the math correctly, a typical practice might have 2,000 patients. If we are only reappointing in the future 80% of those 2,000 patients, that means we're losing 400 in 6 months. That's 66 a month. That is maybe more than the new patients we get per month.
Yes, staggering. Yeah.
So we're pouring water in, but the holes are letting the water leak out. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, that's perfect. And what that's yielding, I've got this patient growth number. The average practice is growing their patient base by 1.8%, right? So nearly flat. For all the money they're spending on marketing to get new patients, they're losing pretty much just as many out the back door. So common problem number one. Common problem number two. This is another thing affecting that. I've got a couple of ancillary slides just to call out. Cancellations and no-shows have been on the rise since COVID, just as a call out. Before COVID, it was like 6 to 8%. Post-COVID, we're like 14, 15%. So that's going to cause problems with patient retention because they're going to fall off the schedule. The second one I mentioned is case acceptance. And I wanted to make sure that people saw both of these numbers. The one on the left, I've labeled patient acceptance. And that's the number that doctors like. That's, hey, I diagnose you with a full treatment plan. And if the patient says yes to something, anything on the treatment plan, that counts as a yes. So you can see back in Q1 of 2021, 79% of patients across the industry were saying yes to something. And now you fast forward to Q2 2024, and I intentionally left the second half of last year off for this second chart, which I'll explain in a second. But we're down to 72% of patients saying yes to something. And an 8 or 7% difference there makes a world of difference in financial outcomes for the business. A huge difference.
Yeah, I don't think my costs went down 8%. I don't think my staff went down 7%. My fees definitely didn't go up 7%.
Yes.
So that's a horrible thing to happen.
Yeah, and then the second one on the right-hand side is I can drive this home maybe a little more clearly with the dollars. So this is looking at, of all the dollars I presented in the time period, what percentage of those dollars are actually getting completed? And rewind to Q1 2021, 44% of the dollars that were getting diagnosed were actually getting scheduled and completed by dentists. And then if I fast forward now to Q2 2024, I'm down to 35%, right? So for context, for every $1 million I'm diagnosing, back just 3 years ago, I was getting $440,000 in collections done. Now, fast forward today, the average practice is only getting $350,000. So almost $100,000 less for the same volume of patients, the same diagnostic habits. If nothing has changed, the average dentist is having to see either higher volume or solve this problem, right? So this is common problem number two that's happening in dentistry. And a lot of doctors are just unaware. Maybe they feel that kind of anecdotally, like, man, I feel like I'm working extra hard, or I'm having to put in, maybe extra effort to get the same outcomes as before. And that is showing up in the data for sure. Now, the last one that I want to comment on is just the reality that it's taking longer and longer to get paid in the practice. And this has real business implications. This has implications for payroll. It makes things a little more sketchy for cash on hand, potentially, if we run into an issue like the Change Healthcare outage we had this last year. So average days to collect was going up before the Change Healthcare outage even started. I just want to make sure I call that out. So patients are taking longer to pay, and insurance carriers are also taking longer to pay. And a combination of those two is yielding a longer average days to collect. So we also have some payment systems that we can improve. We've got practices that are collecting lower than 17 days. We've got practices who collect day of service, no problem, and are out of network with all insurance. And this isn't even a topic of conversation for their business, right? So there are ways to solve this problem as well, but it's one to make sure we pay attention to, because if we don't, we end up with this large outstanding pool of business or dollars that ultimately end up in collections or uncollected altogether. That's the biggest risk here with this. That's why I bring it up. So let's hit actual problem solving. So remember, the 3 problems were patient retention. I want to talk about how to make sure we keep our patients and stick around for a long time. I want to talk a little bit about how we can turn things in our favor to improve our case acceptance. How can we track those patients, those treatment plans, make sure that we have good systems to increase that case acceptance? Then how can we decrease our AR days? And that's what we're going to hit for these last 30 minutes of the webinar. Okay. To hit the patient experience, I want everyone, I'm going to tell a little story here. I want you guys to imagine that you are a patient in your practice. I think oftentimes we get so busy that we don't take the time to actually imagine what it's like. So I want you to imagine, maybe take a day this next week and just like imagine like, what is the patient experience when they come in? How are they greeted? What does it take to get forms completed? How long does it take to get from check-in to the chair in the operatory? When they're in the operatory, what does it look like to have a treatment plan presented? Are they presenting straight out of Dentrix? Are they simplifying that treatment plan? How are financial options being presented? How easy is it to pay your business? When they leave, how easy is it to make a scheduled appointment after hours? There's a lot of things I want you to think about, but let me hit this story. So this picture that I'm showing you here is my buddy TJ. When this was like over 10 years ago, me and some buddies decided to go down to southern Utah and do a hike called the Subway. It's a famous hike in Zion National Park. And we got to a section called Russell Gulch. Now, Russell Gulch online said that it was a, quote, rock and root descent, and that we could do this hike without any rappelling gear. And it was very obvious once we got to this spot that we were not going to be able to descend without rappelling gear. And we ended up having to turn around. So we hiked almost 6.5 miles into this spot and had to turn our sorry butts around and hike all the way back out. Now, all these years, I've thought forever, man, I wish someone would go back to Russell Gulch and put a ladder there so we don't have to feel like my buddy TJ and have to turn around, okay? We had a destination in mind. We started at the trailhead. We wanted to get to the Subway, but we hit this barrier. Now, when you think about your dental practice, they might have a similar experience. So an invitation for this next section, John Maxwell, business researcher, said, I believe that everyone chooses how you approach life. If you're proactive, you focus on preparing. If you're reactive, you end up focusing on repairing. Now, some of us today might find ourselves in a repairing situation, but I'm going to ask you to get into this proactive mindset where we're thinking about the patient experience and where might they hit a hiccup in your business today? Where might they run into an issue that's difficult for scheduling, for payment, for saying yes to treatment, and how can we solve that problem? So once again, imagining we're a patient in the practice. So I've got this little outline. Imagine a potential patient comes in. Some of the barriers they might hit. They hit your initial interaction with you, which might be your Google listing. They're going to see things like your reviews. They're going to see your website. They're going to see, how do I schedule with you? Some of the limitations we might hit, there are things like, let's say it's me and it's, I'm having dinner with friends and I chip my tooth and I'm like, crap, man, I need to get an appointment scheduled. I'm a busy guy. And I go to your website and the call to action is to call us. And I look at your business hours and you're not open until tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'm going to move on to the practice until I find one that I can get an appointment scheduled online might be one of the inhibitions here. I want you to think about the first appointment and experience and continuing care as we talk today. And I'll highlight some of the common places where we lose them. The last thing I'll share before we jump into a system. Six Sigma, and this is like a nerdy way to present it, and I'll give you just the simplified version. I'm not going to go over the whole DMAIC method, but this is from Six Sigma, which is a process improvement methodology. And the DMAIC method basically is a way that we can approach problem solving in the business, but I want to simplify it from this acronym just to this. All that it's saying is, hey, we need to, if we want to solve a problem, let's say, for example, we're losing patients out the back door, we have to pick a measurement. That might be the number I shared earlier, pre-appointment percentage. What percentage of my patients are scheduled to come back today? And then we're going to make a change to a process in the business. So we're going to implement a system. And then we're going to see at the end, we're going to measure and say, hey, did our pre-appointment percentage get better? Did we get more patients to schedule back into the business? If we did, then we're going to put controls in place to operate in this new way. If we didn't improve, we're going to go back to ground zero and come up with a new idea, a new tweak we're going to make until we found a system that works in the business. Does that make sense? So this first one, I want to come back to Dr. Armstrong. So the problem she was facing is a common problem that practices are facing. It's one I jump on and do reviews all the time, where people are very aware of how many new patients they're getting. You can see she was getting 21 new patients, 14 new patients, the top numbers, 24, 26, 30. And she was like, oh, this is great. Like, I'm not spending a whole lot of marketing and I'm getting 20, 30 new patients a month, but I don't understand why I'm not busy, Steve. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I jumped on and did a snapshot review with her. And sure enough, she's just bleeding patients. You can see how many she's losing every month: 48, 42, 52, 35. Almost every single month was a net loss in her patient base. So the question was, how can we implement systems, or what systems could we implement with her team that would be easy, that wouldn't be overwhelming, that would be thoughtful, that would help her team solve this problem simply? So here's where we focused our attention. Number one, we wanted to have 100% clarity on all unscheduled patients. So you can see here, I've got this little pie chart that shows there's 184 unscheduled patients in her business. And each one of those buckets identifies how long it's been since they've been in there. And we specifically wanted to make sure that the 12 to 18 monthers didn't fall off the cracks. So her team started to do follow-ups with those 12 to 18 month patients so they didn't go inactive. The second thing we focused on, and this I think is bread and butter. I think this one will probably resonate with everyone. You're probably focused on this already. And that's making sure that our hygiene reappointment rate is 90% or higher. This is actually a screenshot from this last week in her practice. Her team's crushing. They got 100% reappointment. Now, granted, they only saw 6 patients last week, right? They were they were only open one day, but still 100%. The next thing we did was we got aligned during the morning huddle every single day. In theory, I want you guys to think about this. If today, for example, we're going to see 9 patients, and if every single day we make sure we end the day with more than 9 patients scheduled in the future. So goal number 1 is let's get all 9 patients coming in today scheduled for another appointment. And then if on top of that, we can get some of their family members. So the first one I have highlighted is they had 3 family members that weren't scheduled that were related to the 9 patients coming in. If we can get those 3 family members scheduled, now we're up to 12. And then if we can do a few follow-ups with this 12 to 18 month bucket, get another 2 to 3 scheduled, and end the day with 14 people scheduled when we started with 9. If we do that every single day, then we will end over time, that will compound and will slowly take hacks at this unscheduled active patient-based bucket. Does that make sense? So it's a thoughtful approach where we don't have to go and do hours and hours of phone calls every day, but we just make sure we're aligned as a team with the strategy every day. How can we make sure that we have more patients scheduled in the future than we started with? So if we're seeing 9, we want to get more than that. If we're seeing 50 patients today, we want to get more than 50 patients scheduled for the future. If we do that, we will guarantee that our unscheduled active patients bucket will not increase. It will start decreasing. The last thing we focused on was setting up a system where every time someone fell into this bucket of unscheduled, so they slipped through hygiene, or maybe they slipped through a limited exam, or maybe they slipped through a restorative chair without getting that next appointment, we would automatically create a follow-up after a couple of days for the front office team to alert them and say, hey, we had this patient slip through the cracks, and this follow-up is now assigned to you to start making some attempts to get them scheduled. And every day when the team members log in, they have 2 to 6 or 7 follow-ups assigned to them, and they're responsible for making those phone calls to try to get those patients back on the schedule for the practice. And by doing that every single day, we went from, within 6 months of this focus, we went from having 500 unscheduled active patients down to 184 today, by not making like dramatic changes on the daily behaviors, but just aligning the team around a simple patient retention methodology.
Now, one question was asked, so what are some strategies or verbiage to convince our patients to schedule their family and their friends? And we might also, of course, say, what's the verbiage just to get the patient to schedule, to reappoint? Do you have any thoughts on that, or would you like me to handle that
jump
question?
in, Scott. Go ahead. I just know you've got some really good verbiage on that from your seminar.
Yeah, so we want to not ask the patient that's in the hygiene chair when would be a good time to schedule them in 6 months. We instead just want to schedule them at a similar day and time in 6 months, and then tell them, we're going to call, here's your next appointment in 6 months. We're going to contact you 2 weeks before this appointment to make sure this time and day is good. That alone gets everyone scheduled. In addition to that, we need to do an audit of the day where we always look at yesterday and go make sure every single hygiene patient was actually reappointed, because sometimes it's obviously going to slip through the cracks. Between those two things, we should button it up completely.
Yeah.
Then talking about, hey, how to get the friends and family scheduled, we would say to them, hey, we noticed that your husband's overdue for a cleaning, and we could try to schedule him at the same time as you, or a convenient day. Shall we go ahead and schedule that? Just hitting the nail on the head, just like saying, hey, we noticed your daughter is overdue for cleaning, and we'd like to schedule her right now for that. Would you like her to come in on the day you're always going to be here, or is there a better day to do that? So that's how I would handle that.
Yeah, that's perfect. And then someone else asked the question, what program is generating these reports? So these are screenshots from Dental Intelligence. That's the company that I work for. So this is what I'm familiar with. This is what I have access to. I think there are several tools out there, but one of the things, if you guys are listening and you don't have access to reports like these, one of the cool things that we've always done is we'll do what's called a snapshot. So you can actually get Dental Intelligence installed on Dentrix, EagleSoft, Open Dental, and at no cost to you, one of our team members, Riley, will actually jump on and he'll review your numbers with you. So he'll show you that chart I had with how many new patients are you getting, how many are you losing, your case acceptance numbers. He can even pull a benchmarks report to show you how do you stack up against other practices in the industry similar to you at no cost. So it's super cool. It's a great thing to learn from, especially after going through a session like this one. So I'll throw that link in the chat at the end. I think I've got a page that has that link. So just know that is something that you guys can take advantage of for sure. The next thing, so that's what I worked through with Dr. Armstrong. I want to share this next one for patient retention, this increased problem of cancellations and no-shows. For this one, I went through we've got just over 10,000 practices, and I went through all of DI's customers to identify who of our customers have a really low cancellation and no-show percentage. And I started interviewing them to find out what are you guys doing to keep your cancellations and no-shows percentage low. And I found a dentist and his business manager they've got 5 at the time, now 7 locations. And they have consistently beat the market across all locations. So I knew they had a system that was repeatable, as opposed to like a one-off thing where there's like extra charisma or potential that they don't know what they're doing. I find a lot of people that are having success and sometimes they can't articulate what exactly they're doing. So this was a really fun one. This is from my friend, Dr. Markowitz, but this is just a screenshot of his highest retention practice. His cancellations and no-shows combined were 4% for this last year. And then the practice he just acquired, he implemented the system 2 months before and already got it down from 16% down to 10%. So it's on its way down, but I just want to call out that it's not all the way perfect yet. Like he didn't get it down in 2 months, but it's on its way. And in this interview that I did with him, he highlighted some very specific things that I thought were interesting, worth sharing. Okay. So he said, here's like the high level highlights. And then I'll share a little bit about kind of some of the software elements of that I think are helpful that you guys might want to look at implementing. So he says, number one, this kind of is like table stakes. He says, I think everyone believes this already, but his team is aligned around this vision. They want to make sure the patients actually want to come back. So they do focus on patient experience. I think everyone says that, but just make sure that that's a call out. He said he wants everyone to hear that. I put a lot of weight personally in the number 2, which he said they put a system in place to ensure as near 100% confirmation rate as possible. So that's a combination of automated texts that are going out, which I think is table stakes for most people. I bet 99% of the attendees, if not 100, are sending those texts. But they are also using the follow-ups tool I had shown before for hygiene recare. They're actually using that for confirmation calls. And he does have a team member actually make a phone call. If the automation doesn't work, he said he wants to make sure that he gets them confirmed. And if they don't confirm, then they actually do reschedule that patient and they fill that spot with someone from their wait list. And then the team, he says, they just have aligned around this belief that empty chairs are not an option in the business. And they're going to make sure they've got tools, strategies to make sure that that's the case. That we don't do empty chair time at our dental practices. This is super small. I don't expect you to see this. But what they've done is they've aligned and said, hey, this is just showing their cadence and it's nothing special. They're sending reminders 5, 4, and 3 days before. So this is not anything groundbreaking. The verbiage they're sharing is also not groundbreaking. The one call out I will say is that on the first confirmation request, he added this little asterisk that just says, please note that we do require confirmation in order to keep your appointment. We do not accept cancellations via text. Thank you. And then they up the ante on the third confirmation request. If someone still has not confirmed, they up the ante and they say, John, to avoid a short notice cancellation fee, please reply C to confirm your appointment. So they do progressively up the ante with their verbiage through their text modeling. If anyone's interested in these slides, I'm happy to share them. But this process is working well. They have one of the highest confirmation rates from the text messages we have, which is really impressive. Okay, so making sure that that system works well. And then if that system fails, he has the appointment confirmation set up to say, hey, 72 hours before, because he sends 5, 4, and 3 days before he sends the text. And he says, hey, if the text didn't work, I want to know 72 hours before the appointment for anyone that hasn't confirmed yet. And I want it to alert my team, right? And typically by the time it gets there, we're talking about 3 to 5 patients that haven't confirmed. And now the team's going to follow up with those patients. And he can track, of course, those attempts. Are they converting? Are they getting them scheduled to make sure that they're first? Now, the big thing I'll highlight, I've got this visual here of the process. The one thing I didn't note in those slides is this one little caveat in the follow-up process. So he sends the automated text reminders. If those fail, he creates an automatic reminder for his team. Hey, these people haven't confirmed yet. His team then goes and will send what's called a voicemail drop before they go and actually do the phone call. So we want to make sure we keep efficiency. The way the voicemail drop works is this. The doctor's actually recorded a message that says, hey, this is Dr. Markowitz. Notice that you haven't confirmed your appointment yet. We're excited to see you here in a couple of days. Please reach back out to the team. In order to keep your appointment, we need you to confirm, look forward to see you soon. Something like that. And his team can take that message, that generic message, and they can bulk send it out to these 3 or 4 patients. And their phone will buzz. It looks like they missed a phone call from the practice. And it automatically uploads this voicemail from the doctor. And it looks like they just got this thoughtful message from Dr. Markowitz, excited to see them. And they get a lot of success with sending out those voicemail drops. Those are also good for like post-op calls, also great for following up on treatment plan and stuff like that. And then if that fails, he's got another reminder that says, hey, now if that didn't work, let's automatically follow up with them and make that manual recare phone call. He said, the idea is I want my team to do those manual phone call efforts, but I don't want to make that the first line of attack. It's the most expensive line of attack to have our team making those manual phone calls. So as much as he can have automated processes that are completing tasks for him and then get to the point where we're doing one-to-many with the voicemail drops and then recare phone calls, that is the best system. Now, before I move on, Scott, is there stuff in the chat I need to pay attention to here?
Well, I mean, I just want to kind of maybe sum this up because it's really cool. So what we're talking about here is looking at a practice that has some of the lowest cancellations in the country. And most of us suffer from cancellations, very frustrating. And what they're doing is they're utilizing automated texting. Those texts get slightly more aggressive each time. The first text is normal. The second one says, hey, you have to confirm to keep your appointment. And the third one says, hey, in order to avoid a cancellation fee, right? And then if all of that automation didn't work, which the staff hasn't done any work yet.
Yeah.
Then the team gets this perfectly clean, communicated list of unconfirmed patients.
Yeah.
And instead of calling them all, the team first just clicks, mass drops a very personalized kind of sounding voicemail from the doctor. And then if that doesn't work, finally, they're making a phone call. So by then, we've taken away almost all the work the team has to do. We've really encouraged the patient to call in some very smart ways. And the work that's left over is minimal. And this practice says if they still haven't freaking confirmed by then, after all that stuff, we're pulling them off the schedule. We don't believe they're going to come. We're not playing that gambling game. We're going to lose this. And we're just going to pull them off the schedule and fill them with someone else. And we've notified them. What a really cool thing to set up. One question that was asked is, okay, if you are gonna charge a no-show fee, how much should that be? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, in this particular example, Dr. Markowitz said in the last 5 years that he's been running this, he actually has never charged the fee. I mean, I know there are people that do charge that fee, and he has it advertised as a $50 cancellation fee. He said he actually has not ever gone through with that. I think that's pretty common. Do you have a strong opinion? I've never gone and actually done an analysis. That would be an interesting one to see if I could find evidence that a practice is charging that on the ledger, and see if it actually improves things. He has not actually billed it.
Yeah. So when you charge a fee and you enforce it, what happens is you do prevent some people from canceling once they find out about the fee. You also cause some people to leave your practice.
Yeah.
And when is that the right decision? It's when your practice has got a really full schedule where you don't mind if some people leave. If it's going to help you prevent a cancellation, you don't mind if you lose some. You'll fill that slot with some other patients because you've got a backlog of patients. But the opposite practice of one with a full schedule is obviously one with an empty schedule, like a startup. And in that case, someone that canceled or no-showed didn't really cost you anything because you already had other holes in the schedule. Like, it's not like you were going to fill that slot with someone else. And so we don't want to lose patients in that phase of our practice growth. So if we have this open schedule, this open capacity, I would coach people to not yet have a cancellation fee as one of the threats or one of the reasons, you use, because you will lose patient base when you're desperate to grow. But on the flip side, once you get busy, now we have the power to build some barriers so that we're only letting in the people that we really want, because we got too many people to begin with.
Yeah, I think that's super thoughtful. I'm looking through any of these other questions. A few people asked about the voicemail drops. Those are, as far as I know, I think Dental Intelligence is the only one who offers that as a service. That's part of our engagement platform. I'm surprised that more aren't doing it. It's a really thoughtful touch. The primary use case it was created for was for post-op messages. The idea was doctors finish the day. We know they're busy. It's tough to want to get on the phone and follow up with those bigger case patients where they need just a check-in from the post-op instructions. So the idea was, hey, a doctor could just record this voicemail and say, hey, this is Dr. Luna. No need to call me back. Just wanted to make sure that things are going well, that you are following the post-op instructions my team gave you. Love seeing you today. Excited to have you back, here soon, talk to you later. That kind of a thing where they get this personal touch, but it's your team that can do these. It's called a one-to-many activity. It just creates a lot of efficiency where they can use your voice. And you put a lot of thought into that message, but then they can use it across a lot of your patients. And the more we can think that way, then the more we can do with our current teams. That's the concept. And we're trying to implement, that's voicemail drops. So we're trying to implement as much of that as we can within software features. And that's kind of where Dental Intelligence fits in the market. We're just trying to solve problems. And anyway, so
Steve, let me add to that. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that feature could also be used for things like following up with all the people that you've diagnosed Invisalign for, trying to bring them back in for a new consultation. It could be recorded from the doctor, sent out. All the patients that needed a root canal, all the patients that needed the crown after the root canal, all the patients that need surgery, that could all be this bulk kind of voicemail that's left to try to warm up the lead or the patient to either reach out to us or to respond better when we do reach out to them verbally. It kind of warms them up. I want everyone to think about for a second, what if 2 or 3 years ago, you upgraded your confirmation process to something like this? What if 3 years ago, you implemented an outbound implant voicemail campaign, an outbound crown, an outbound Invisalign campaign, an outbound campaign about insurance benefits running out at the end of the year? and all your team had to do is click and mass send. What if you did that 3 years from now? What would be different for you today? Let's not let another 3 years go by until you start making decisions like this, if any of these things are an improvement to what you got today.
Yeah.
So this is like my little call to action with practice management. Like, these are all very interesting things to learn and hear about, but someone on this call needs to take this information that they're benefiting from and commit to like now changing, doing an action with it to see if we don't waste any more years with a no show and cancellation problem.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna, I've got, I'm like right on time. It is great. I want to hit this next problem. This is just a screenshot of claims aging and AR aging. This is pretty normal to jump in and see, hey, we've got a lot in our orange, yellow, and red buckets. And so as we think about the collections problem, this one I'm going to keep really simple for the sake tonight of how do we think about improving this process, and just put the same slide I had up, but I just changed the words. So I want you to take the same automation first mindset, but think about your collections process now. So what that might look like is we're going to send out for our patient AR, we're going to send out a bulk payment request. So our patients are going to receive a text, and it's going to have a link that they can go and see their balance due and make a payment to the practice. That is going to get a good number of our patients to make a payment. And without fail, some will not respond to that email or that text. And we're going to create an automated follow-up to say, hey, Dental Intelligence, if I have a patient get 15 days after a procedure and their balance is above zero, I want you to automatically, they haven't made the payment, I want you to automatically create a follow-up and assign it to a specific team member. And once again, that might be 2 to 3 of these a day. And then that team member can then maybe use a voicemail drop, maybe the same thing from the doc, or maybe in this sense, it's the office manager or business admin team that records this voicemail and says, hey, just following up on, a balance owed, however you want that to say. I actually don't have a good verbiage there, Scott. I don't know if you've got something good to say on collecting a balance. That can be uncomfortable for everyone, but it might be a use case to use a voicemail drop and then hit the team member and say, hey, that didn't work. Now let's go ahead and do that manual phone call to collect, so that we're not pushing that payment out 6 months before we see them in hygiene again, potentially. So that's the one thing I'll offer up for the collections process for the sake of tonight.
Yeah, what you've got is you've got a lot of our team members that are having to call and leave voicemails, and so often they're the same kind of voicemail. If we could just record a standard voicemail for that is not custom to that one patient, but it'll work for all of that effort. Man, what a way to take away workload from our team and to make them a lot more effective. In a world where it's hard to find team members, it's hard to afford team members, it's hard to get team members to like be effective with all of these kind of challenges. This is the kind of thing that we need to go to.
Yeah, that's great. So with this one, and then I had a few people ask me, who do we contact? You'll contact me or Riley. I'll throw my personal contact information. I love connecting with people. Riley's the one that can help people, get signed up, answer questions about that, stuff like that. But I'm happy to jump on as well. The last thing I promised I would hit is maybe just quick high level, a few things on case acceptance. So I'll just make a couple of quick call outs. I had 3 things here. I'm just going to hit this last one, that treatment acceptance dollars number. One of the things that surprises dentists, owners, when I go do a business x-ray of their clinical process, one of the things that surprises them is that their acceptance rate changes based on what other team member they're presenting treatment with. So in this example, I changed it to office, the office names of, Pam Beasley, Jim Halpert. This is a real practice. And the 3 below, so we've got doctor by themselves, and then we have doctor with these 3 different hygienists. And he's presenting obviously the most by himself, 800,000 by himself, gets a 33% dollar acceptance rate. So on $1 million, he's getting 330,000 scheduled when he's presenting by himself. But when doctor presents with Pam, gets 49%. When doctor presents with Jim in this example, 39%. When doctor presents with Angela, 44%. And this is very common when I jump into practices, and it just shows me they don't have a clear clinical, what's the word I'm looking for? Standard procedure to say, hey, here's how, when a patient comes in, here's how we talk to them about treatment. Here's how we do semantic priming. Here's how we prep them as a hygienist for the conversation with the doctor. What these variations tell me is that there's inconsistency in the training or in the process with the team. And the better our training gets, the more consistent or homogenous these treatment acceptance numbers become, because our team members get up leveled. We learn from each other. So this is one place I always like to go look when I first jump into businesses. It helps me understand kind of where they're at with their teams as a whole. So that's something that we can look at. The second place I like to go look is their average restorative dollars per exam that they are completing. And this might be a confusing graph. This is that same doctor, Dr. Armstrong. So we worked on her patient retention numbers, but she also realized like this doctor was doing $270 per exam. That's how much production he was completing. And that is not going to sustain any dentist who wants to pay a mortgage and pay team members and have a life and keep the doors open. And so she had to really improve her focus on her procedure mix, what she's presenting, how she's presenting it, and improve her compliance with her team. Now, she's got a small team, but make sure that we've got clear training on how we are approaching the treatment acceptance process. And we can, that's a whole webinar. Scott's got a whole system around this that, I'll leave for the details of that to Scott. One of the things I've always loved that Scott highlights is that one of the updates that you can make that's simple, and I'm highlighting this because this is a software improvement, is the practice management software, when you're presenting treatment, spits out a pretty monstrous, ugly page that has a ton of numbers that are confusing to the patient. And we can refine our treatment plan presentation to simplify it and use a method that allows the patient to quickly understand what their total is, what their benefit is from the insurance company, and what their portion will be. I know, Scott, you've got a lot of thoughts on this, and you could spend probably 20 minutes on this section. But this changed too by getting out of the practice management software treatment plan and creating a form that simplifies this will also help improve a patient's ability to say yes. I think, Scott, that the term is the waterfall financial presentation, right? Where we want to hit them with, this is your total. Lucky for you, your insurance company will cover this dollar amount, which means you only have to pay $650 to get this full treatment plan, right? Is kind of the idea.
Yeah. When you look at what's on the left, that's what most practices use. That's right out of your practice management software like Dentrix or EagleSoft or so forth. That is itemized, which tempts a patient to start picking and choosing, as opposed to here's everything you need to be healthy and there's a cost. No, we say, well, the cost of this is that, the cost of that one, the cost of that one, the cost of that one, the cost of that one. And if the patient doesn't want or understand everything, then they're very tempted to just start picking and choosing, which means you get a smaller percentage of your average treatment plan done when compared to bundling it or simplifying it. The other problem with it is that it's confusing. It's not in English. It can also show a lot of information about insurance, which causes a whole lot of other concerns and questions. So what you're seeing on the right is something simple so patients understand it. They're not tempted to pick and choose. And then when you look at how the finances are presented, you don't find 80 numbers on one page. You find a few. And it's using what's called a step down technique. So you start with the biggest number. The total cost for this is $2,093. But then you say you've got great insurance and you've got insurance discounts of so much and insurance payments of so much. And then you're left with just your portion. To start with sticker shock and work your way down to the patient's portion is a very smart strategy that gets a lot more acceptance. To do it backwards, which you see on the left, to start with the little numbers and end up with the big one on the end is not going to be as effective. And these are things that can be not by gut, but you could test them. So you could do it one way and then you could do it the other way. And using dental intel, you can easily measure what's actually happening with the presentations.
Yeah, thank you. The last thing I'll hit here for treatment acceptance that I'm a huge fan of is every single day, team members can align on who do we have coming into the business and make sure we have a solid plan around two things. Number one, of all the patients coming in, who has unscheduled treatment? Now, the ones that are coming already, into the restorative chairs, we're going to have that conversation. I think the doctors and treatment teams are aligned on that. But the hygiene team, this is another one of those opportunities for the hygiene team to adequately prep for their conversations going into their cleaning, so that as they identify those spots, they can repoint them out so that when the doctor comes in, they have a very successful conversation. The second thing that I'm a big fan of aligning on every single day is our follow-up task. So I can also make sure that anytime a treatment plan, let's say you say, hey, I want to make sure that my team member, if we get a week after I diagnose something or 2 weeks after I diagnose something and it still hasn't been scheduled yet, I want someone in my practice to be alerted about that. And I want to see that they're making follow-up attempts with those patients. And I want to know, like, how many of those are ultimately getting scheduled and how many of those are not getting scheduled. And that's another place where I would use this follow-ups tool. And if you're following along doing math, maybe we're going to have a couple follow-ups a day for hygiene, a couple follow-ups a day for patient AR, a couple follow-ups a day for these unscheduled treatment plans. And when you think about the total workload for the team, it's not a massive number. We get to the point where we're talking about, 6 to 12 daily follow-up tasks that a front office team member might have to do. And that's a very thoughtful approach to making sure that none of these things slip through the cracks. Now, we're right at the end of time. I wanted to make sure I left a few minutes for Q&A. So I'll go ahead and throw up this. This is my contact information, so feel free. And then I also got a slide for Scott as well. This is my contact info, so my email and my personal cell. Feel free to reach out to me via email is probably the best way. You can text me too. The email is great. And then the QR code, that is a scheduling link for Riley. So if you want to do a demo of DI, he can help with that. If you want to do that snapshot I mentioned where we will actually install dental intelligence and show you your numbers, he can help with that as well. So that scheduling link, that QR code is where you'll get that done. And I'll go ahead and leave this up for a second, Scott, and then I'll throw up.
Yeah, while you're leaving this up, my team just reached out to me. You are all going to be emailed a link to watch this recording again in case you had to step out, you had to do an exam on a patient, or you had connectivity issues. So look for an email coming soon. We're also about to answer some more questions, so don't jump just yet. Steve, if you could go to the next slide real quick. Some of you don't know who I am. You've never heard me speak or anything like that. If you want a very deep, intense business training experience in dentistry, we've got probably the highest quality business training courses in dentistry. And these are around building offices, running offices, having multiple locations, even becoming the best CEO you can. This is a tiny, tiny little taste of what you would get, 16 hours of details of exactly what to do and say. So if you're interested in that, please visit the website. There's a code there that you could use to save some money. That'd probably pay for your flight and hotel, and that thing is going to go away. So make sure you look at that as well. If for whatever reason I've never met you before and you haven't been to our courses. All right. So Steve, if you want to dive into some of these questions before we run out of time, and that would be awesome.
And I think I'll throw, you didn't ask me to do this, but I'll just tell folks that practices that work and go through Scott's seminars are our highest performing practices. So I just want you guys to understand that we're always looking as a company at like what are practices doing and learning to be successful. And the practices that go through Scott's courses are consistently some of the highest performing practices that are on dental intelligence. And so you're getting insanely high quality content there. I just want to make sure I give that plug. Okay, let me look at questions. Akam, can you attach third-party lender to that simple treatment plan to show monthly payments? You can. So part of that digital workflow that I didn't show is that you have the option to do third-party financing in that presentation. You can upload your own if you have a link, Cherry or Sunbit or WiseTac is one that's there, or Care Credit. We are currently this quarter working on a deeper integration with Care Credit. There are just so many practices that use that service. So we are working with them to make that a little more integrated and easy for you as well for pre-approvals and stuff. So that is something that can be added into that workflow. I think this one asked about a refresher on analytics. Currently a customer, love that. I just go ahead and reach out to me personally, and happy to do a 30-minute session, do a refresher there, look at the business. I love those. Those are my favorite. Let's see. Jed asks, how do we make sure we're entering data into our PMS accurately in order to receive an accurate report? In general, most things practices are doing will come through perfectly. There's not too many things you can do to screw up your data. One thing I will say, as long as we're doing the same thing consistently over time, then when we measure it, it will be, all we want to do is just see that number go up, if that makes sense. So some folks will say, hey, I put in 2 treatment plans for a lot of patients and I don't delete the one that didn't get accepted. That's perfectly fine. As long as we keep that same behavior consistent over time, then you'll just know that your treatment acceptance number maybe is slightly deflated. But if that number is going up, that means we know we're improving with the same behavior. So I'm not a huge fan of making dramatic changes to how we're entering data into the system. The common ones I see, though, are cancellations and no-shows. Folks will just drag an appointment over and they won't go through the official break appointment process that creates that data tag so that we can accurately measure that one. So that is one that I often tell people to improve. The other one that's really common is folks won't attach procedure codes to future appointments in restorative or in hygiene. And in order for us to forecast future business, that's a really critical habit. So those are the 2 kind of common ones. But
yeah, let me kind of comment on that last one. So it's very common for hygiene teams to just create a future prophy appointment without actually putting the prophy in it. And so your software doesn't know that's a reappointed prophy if the prophy is not in it. And so it's so important for us to understand if we're reappointing people. So sometimes you'll find that, and it'll be pretty obvious inside of Dental Intel, because you're I know we reappoint people. It's not 10%. So it'll be obvious. And that will lead to this very healthy kind of moment where you go back to your team. It's hey guys, we're supposed to be, adding procedures. It's not very difficult to do it, but you definitely want to use your software the way it was intended to be used.
Yeah. It also allows, I like to look at future scheduled appointments to see, hey, in hygiene, how close are we to full operatory capacity? And unless we have those hygiene codes attached, I have no idea how many hygiene appointments I have scheduled in the future. So I can't measure how full I am and be able to forecast my hygiene revenue. So it's just super critical for making smart business decisions about what's coming up. Cool. I think I hit most of the.
One question was, do you guys have a VoIP phone service that you recommend or that you have?
Yeah. So right now we're partnered. I saw someone mention Mango in the chat. Right now we're partnered with Mango and PureLogic are the ones that we'll send people to. Our call pop. So some of these features you can use with any VoIP service, quite honestly. But those are the 2 that we have been working with pretty consistently over the years. And they're both have great service and great options. Do you have insurance?
Well, if there is one last one, let's consider it the last one. We are out of time. I want to be respectful of that. But is there one last one you want to answer?
Some of these are probably going to take more time. So Jonathan, follow up with me afterward on metrics and tasks to focus on every single day. I think we want to align around kind of your business specifically. That's where one of these snapshots would be very helpful. So we make sure we focus on the right things. And I don't want to distract the team if we don't need to focus on a specific area. And then insurance verification, that's a quick, easy one. Yes, we do insurance verification breakdowns. Just a note there are still limitations. If you use any of these digital solutions, we are limited to whatever the insurance payers will send to us digitally. And as you can imagine, there are 30% of those that don't share as much information as you want that would still require some manual follow-up. So just be aware of that. But yes, we can get eligibility responses are pretty high, but then when we get into detailed, it typically requires some manual effort there, but you can get a good amount of information from the big carriers. So I'll leave it there, and we can show you how that works and what information you can get. So.
All right. Well, we've got to wrap this up. Steve, I want to thank you for going through so many cool slides, giving us the latest on how things are going. We all feel some of the pressures that you've talked about. I also want to thank you for actually showing us something very valuable, how successful practices are actually doing these specific things. And of course, I've always been a huge fan of Dental Intel since day one. And so I appreciate Dental Intel's continued focus on innovating, on expanding what it can do, on making it easier for everyone, including, of course, our team members. This has been a wonderful, I think, learning session for a lot of us. Those of you that logged in, we have these webinars frequently, sometimes with guests like Steve, sometimes just myself talking about specific topics. We try to always go deep. Look for those other webinars on our website. They're always free. We always try to make them interesting, and they're always convenient in the evening and recorded. All right, Steve, any last words here before we hang up?
No, thank you guys for joining. This has been great.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Scott.